Masechet Makkot Daf Yod Tet. Amar Rava Bar Ada Amar Rabbi Yitzchak teaches Bikurim Me'ematay mechayvin alehen mishiru penei habayit. Regarding Bikurim, at what point is one liable regarding them? It's when they see the face of the house. So the question is actually regarding two laws. Number one, if a non-Kohen eats Bikurim, he is liable. So the question is, at what point do they officially become Bikurim such that a non-Kohen who eats them would be liable? Second point is, if a Kohen is permitted to eat Bikurim, but he has to eat the Bikurim within Yerushalayim, can't eat it without. So at what point does it officially become Bikurim such that a Kohen who eats it outside Yerushalayim will also be liable? And the answer is, when they see the face of the house, meaning when they enter the courtyard temple, the temple courtyard area. Keman ki haytana detanya Rabbi Eliezer omer bikurim miksatan bachutz miksatan bifnim shebachutz harehen kecholin lechol divrehen shebifnim harehen keegdesh lechol divrehen. And Rabbi Yitzchak here follows the following baraita in which Rabbi Eliezer teaches that, let's say you have a lot of fruit and you bring it into the wall, into the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash, and half of them are outside and half of them are inside. There's still half and half. You bring a big wagon full of them. So what's their law? And the answer is, whatever is outside of the courtyard is like chulin. It's just like regular produce. A non-Kohen, if he eats it, no problem. Whereas that which already entered, if it's like half a wagon, or some baskets came in, some baskets are out, whatever it is, so whatever is in is considered hekdesh, meaning a non-Kohen would be liable, and a Kohen can eat it, but only inside, not outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. Amar Rav Sheshat, Bikurim hanacha me'akevet bahen, kiriya en me'akevet bahen. Rav Sheshat says, an opinion that we've already seen in the name of other sages, that regarding Bikurim, it's the placement of the basket of Bikurim by the Kohen next to the Mizbeach. That's what's necessary to make them Bikurim, such that now the Kohen can eat it. However, the recitation by the farmer of Arami Oved Avi, while he's supposed to say it, it's a mitzvah, but it's not me'akev. If he doesn't do it, the bikurim is still valid bikurim. Keman ki haytana. Who is the author? What opinion? What Tana is Rav Sheshat following? It's the following Tana in the following Baraita. Now this is curious because we already saw previously opinions of sages that said this. So why are we asking it again? And the answer is not going to be any of the sages that we quoted before. It seems as if this sugya is from a different yeshiva that was not aware of the other yeshiva before, and the editor of this masechet put one here and put them there. So it's like two separate discussions about the same opinion that do not refer to one another. So we're lucky. We have even two sugya, two different discussions that are not dependent one on the other regarding the subject. The Tanya. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Shelosha Devrim Bishum Shelosha Zikenim. So the Rabbi Yosef said, three matters in the name of three elders. We're not going to see all three because we're only going to see the one that's relevant for us. And that is that of Rabbi Ishmael Omer. Yachol ya'aleh adam ma'aser sheni bezman hazeh b'Yerushalayim v'yochelenu. Can it be that someone could take ma'aser sheni, a farmer in Israel, separates ma'aser sheni, can he bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it in Yerushalayim with the sanctity of ma'aser sheni nowadays, even though there's no Bet HaMikdash? It's a good question. Maybe Yerushalayim still has its holiness and one can fulfill it. Generally, what we do today is that we do not do that. We do not eat ma'aser sheni, but we do have to separate it because it's still a requirement. So what we do nowadays is we will separate Maaser Sheni, but then redeem it. And we redeem it not based on its equivalent value, but based on a small amount. So you might take a lot of produce and redeem it just for a small coin, and then that coin you cannot use. And then the Maaser Sheni can be in anywhere. So we do take Maaser Sheni, but we do not eat it in Yerushalayim. But what if someone wanted to? Could they and not redeem it and eat it in Yerushalayim? V'dinhu bechor ta'un hava'at makom u'maaser sheni ta'un hava'at makom. Ma bechor eno ela bifnei habayit af maaser eno ela bifnei habayit. So we're going to make a comparison to a firstborn animal, which, if it's tahor, if it's not blemished, has to be brought as a korban in Yerushalayim by the Kohen, and it's it's sacrificed as a korban, and the kohen can eat the rest of it. Now a bechor, that also requires that it come to the place, meaning to Yerushalayim, and maaseh sheni also has to be brought to Yerushalayim. So they're similar in that way. Therefore, we can compare their laws. And bechor, we know that you cannot bring a bechor and eat it in Yerushalayim unless the Bet HaMikdash is up, which is obvious because it's a korban, and so obviously you can't bring a korban without a Bet HaMikdash. And so too, maaser is the same. It also has to be brought to Yerushalayim, so it cannot be brought and eaten as maaser sheni without the Bet HaMikdash present. And so since there's no possibility of eating maaser sheni, nowadays we have to redeem it for money. But we challenge this statement of Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael himself challenges it and says, well, you can counter. But bechor is different because it requires that you place blood and the innards on the mizbeach, which is not true for maaser sheni. So you might say, oh, bechor is different. It's a whole korban. That you can't do it without a Bet HaMikdash. Obviously, you can't bring it as a korban without a Bet HaMikdash. But maaser sheni, it just has to be brought within Yerushalayim. You don't have to do anything. Just bring it into the walls. So it's really not comparable. So he answers, Bikurim yochichu. So we can learn it from Bikurim. Bikurim also does not apply in when there's no Bet HaMikdash. If there's no Bet HaMikdash, you can't bring Bikurim. And that does not have, you don't have to bring the blood or the innards of the Bikurim. It's not a korban. And it does not apply when there's no Bet HaMikdash. So we can learn from Bikurim to Maaser Sheni that both of them have to be brought to Jerusalem. And just like Bikurim does not apply nowadays, so to Maaser Sheni does not apply. You cannot bring it. But we challenge that too. Bikurim, one must place it next to the Mizbeach. That's a special law regarding Bikurim. So you couldn't do that without a Mizbeach and without a Bet HaMikdash. So that's a different law, and you can't learn from Bikurim either to Maaser Sheni. So now we're stuck. We tried from Bechor to Maaser Sheni, didn't work. We tried from Bikurim to Maaser Sheni, we didn't work. You can ask the Sada Shaveh, which we're going to ask in a couple of minutes. But right now, Rabbi Ishmael is going to say, you know what? I'll learn it in a different way, not by comparison, but from this pasuk, Talmud Omar, V'achalta sham lifnei Adonai Elohecha. You will eat there. The pasuk we analyzed already at length, and there in Yerushalayim you will eat maaser and bechor. It continues and gives the list of all the different items that you have to eat in Yerushalayim. So there's a hekesh here. Makish maaser lebechor. Ma bechor eno ela bifnei habayit, af maaser eno ela bifnei habayit. Since they're all next to each other in this pasuk, just like a firstborn has to be done only when the Bet HaMikdash is up, so too Maaser Sheni can only be brought in Yerushalayim when the Bet HaMikdash is up. Good. So where the comparison is not based on a conceptual comparison, which by reason, which we can reject, but rather by a hekesh from the pasuk. Okay, that's all what Rabbi Ishmael said. Now, the whole reason we brought all this is to prove that this statement of Rabbi Ishmael is the source for Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet is following this when Rav Sheshet says that Hanacha me'akevet and Kirya ena me'akevet. How do you see that from this baraita that didn't say much anything about reading? It's from the following point. V'im ita lifroch ma lebikurim sheken tonim Kirya v'hanacha. If Rabbi Ishmael thought that recitation is also me'akev, then in the challenge to the comparison to Bikurim, instead of saying, well, you can't compare it to Bikurim because Bikurim require Hanacha, he should have said, you can't compare it because Bikurim require Hanacha and Kiriyah, and that needs recitation, but he left out recitation. So we can infer from this that Rabbi Ishmael does not think that one needs to do recitation. That is the proof that Rabbi Ishmael follows the same ruling, and Rav Sheshet follows this ruling of Rabbi Ishmael. Amar Rav Asher. Rav Asher disagrees with this proof. Nidi kubaleka misva mi leka velema misva velifroch. Okay, even if you don't have to do kiriyah, even agreeing with that, I would still have the same question, because wouldn't everyone agree that it's a mitzvah to say Adami Vedavi? Even if it's not a requirement, you should say it. And therefore, we can use the mitzvah to reject it. And he could have said easily here, you can't compare us to Bikurim because it requires Hanacha and there's a mitzvah for recitation. And so those things don't apply to Maaser Sheni. So he still could have included it in the refutation, even if it was only a mitzvah. But he doesn't include it at all. Therefore, Rav Asher says something else. Ela ma Rav Asher. Kevan de'ika bikorei haged deba'el memad asher nishba Adonai labotenu v'lama se'amad la pesika le. Rav Asher explains, do you know why the Ishmael left out the recitation from his disproof of that din? It's because when it comes to bikurim, if a convert brings bikurim, can they say the entire Mikra Bikurim? They cannot, because in the paragraph of Arami Oved Avi, it says, thank you Hashem, right? I've come to the land that Hashem has swore to my forefathers. But since he's a convert, his biological forefathers were not promised the land, so he can't say that. If he can't say that line, he doesn't say the entire recitation. Therefore, a convert who brings Bikurim, he must bring Bikurim, and it's placed next to the Zbech, but he doesn't say a recitation. So therefore, Rabbi Ishmael wanted to pick items that are true across the board regarding Bikurim. Everyone who brings Bikurim, the Kohen has to put it next to Mizbeach. But not everybody who brings Bikurim is there even a mitzvah to have recitation. Some people like Ger don't have recitation. So he left out things that are not pisikale, that are not clear-cut across the board. Now back to that comparison that Rabbi Ishmael made and rejected. Wait a second, we could defend it. You can use this mahasad, the common denominator. You said that maaseh sheni is different from Bechor and also different from Bikurim. But Bikurim does not have the flaw that Bechor does, and Bechor doesn't have the flaw that Bikurim does. So put them together, and from both together we can learn that, just like both of those can only apply when the Bet HaMikdash is up, so too Maaseh Sheni is only when the Bet HaMikdash is up. But that also will be rejected. Mishum di'ika lemifrach, ma lesad hasheveh sheben sheken yesh behen sad mizbeach. What Bechor and Bikurim have in common is that they both have a law that involves the Mizbeach, either burning parts of it on the Mizbeach or putting the Bikurim next to the Mizbeach, but that's not true of Maaseh Sheni, which has nothing to do with the Mizbeach. You just bring it in and eat it. You don't have to do anything with the Mizbeach, so therefore, even both of those together cannot be a proof, and that's why the Ishmael resorted to this Hekesh. Umay kasabar, I kasabar Kiddusha Rishona, Kiddusha L'Sha'ata, V'Kiddusha Le'atid Labo, Bechor Nameh, I kasabar Kiddusha Rishona, Kiddusha L'Sha'ata, Ve'lo Kiddusha Le'atid Labo, Afilu Bechor Nameh Tiba'eh. What does Rabbi Ishmael think? If he thinks that the original sanctification of Yerushalayim done at the time of the first Bet HaMikdash made Yerushalayim sanctified at that time and also for the future indefinitely, meaning Yerushalayim, the Temple Mount, is a holy place forever, well, in that case, you should be able to bring Bechor even nowadays. It's true, you don't have a Bet HaMikdash, but technically you don't need a whole Bet HaMikdash to make a sacrifice. You only need a Mizbeach. So go find the right spot, figure it out, make a Mizbeach, and you could bring a Bechor nowadays also if Yerushalayim is always holy. And in that case, we would learn that Maaseh Sheni, sure, why not bring it also if Yerushalayim is really holy? So it can't be that Rabbi Ishmael thinks that. Rather, it must be, is it true that Rabbi Ishmael thinks that the holiness of Yerushalayim with sanctification was only for that time when the Bet HaMikdash was up, but it did not apply to the future, and now there's no Bet HaMikdash, and therefore Yerushalayim is not holy, then do you even have to bring up the question at all? Forget about Maaseh Sheni, even about Bechor, you don't even have to talk about the question, because if there's no sanctification of Yerushalayim, then obviously there's no Bet HaMikdash, you can't even make a Mizbeach. So how are you going to bring a Bechor without a Mizbeach? How are you going to make a sacrifice without a Mizbeach? So you don't even have to, before you even talk about Maaseh Sheni, you're learning it from Bechor. But Bechor is not even a question for sure. There's no topic of discussion. If Yerushalayim is not holy, then surely you can't bring Bechor, not Bikurim, not Maaseh Sheni, or anything. Why are you even bringing up the question? Ravina explains, in fact, Rabbi Ishmael thinks that the holiness of Yerushalayim, of the Temple Mount specifically, was temporary, only when the Bet HaMikdash was there. But nowadays, after the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, on the day it's destroyed, it loses its holy status. So what are we even talking about regarding a Bechor? How could you even think that you might be able to eat a korban of Bechor? Hacha bebechor shenizrak damo kodem churban habayit v'charav habayit v'adayin besaro kayam u'makishinan besaro ledamo ma damo b'mizbeach af besaro b'mizbeach u'makish ma'aseh libechor. In fact, this entire discussion is about this one specific case where someone had a Bechor animal while the Bet HaMikdash was up, and he brings it to Yerushalayim, and they slaughter it, and the blood was sprinkled on the Mizbeach, and right at that moment, before they ate all of the Kohen ate all of the meat, the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. That very moment it was destroyed, and now there's still some meat that can be eaten. That's the question. Can we eat it? There's no Bet HaMikdash, so now do we say, since there's no Bet HaMikdash and the holiness is not permanent, so now it's not, it's in Yerushalayim, but Yerushalayim is not a holy place. Can the Kohen still eat it? Because it was made, the blood was sprinkled when the Bet HaMikdash was up, so does that make the meat permitted for good, even without Bet HaMikdash, or now without a Bet HaMikdash, now you can't eat it anymore? That was the question. And the answer is that we compare the flesh to the blood. Just like the blood requires a mizbeach to sprinkle it on, so to eating the flesh requires a mizbeach, and therefore in this scenario, once the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, you cannot eat that meat. That's what we're talking about. And then once we understand that the flesh of a bechor cannot be eaten when the Bet HaMikdash is not up, then we make the second hekesh between maaser and bechor, that just like a bechor you cannot eat without the Bet HaMikdash, so to maaser sheni you cannot eat in Yerushalayim when there is no Bet HaMikdash. So it's a two-step process. We're saying blood cannot be offered, and therefore flesh cannot be eaten. And since flesh of Bechor cannot be eaten, so therefore Maaser Sheni cannot be eaten in Yerushalayim without the Bet HaMikdash. Now we follow up question. Can you take a result, a conclusion from a Hekesh, and use that to build another Hekesh? There's a law specifically regarding Korbanot, that when you're learning laws about korbanot, you can only make one-step hekesh. You can't make a two-step hekesh, A to B and B to C. And in this case, well, it looks like we're making two steps because we're learning from dam to basar and from basar to maaser. And you can't do that regarding sacrificial items. And the answer is maasar dagan cholin hu. No, maaser sheni of produce is chulin. It's true that there's a law that you have to eat it in Yerushalayim. That's a requirement, but it itself is not holy. And therefore, while yes, the hekesh from A to B is regarding sacrificial items, dam to basar, but the second one from B to C, from basar to maaser, is not talking about a sacrificial item. So that's why we can make that double hekesh. And that answer is good according to the one that says we focus on the B to C. If the B to C is chulin, then it's okay, we allow the whole thing. But there's another opinion that we focus on the thing that is first learned, A to B. And if A to B is regarding sacrificial things, then that's it. B is the end of the line, and you can't make another hekesh even if C is chulin. Then how will you learn this law? And the answer is damu basar chadam miletahi. No, even according to that opinion, really the blood and the basar, we're not learning that from a hekesh. They're all one thing. They're all part of the same animal. And so therefore, the blood and the flesh, they all have the same law because they're all the same, from the same animal. And just like the blood cannot be done without a mizbeach, so too the flesh cannot be eaten without the mizbeach. That's all just one law. And they're only making one hekesh, which is permitted, from the bechor to maaser sheni. And so that's how we can learn, according to all opinions, that just like bechor does not apply without a Bet HaMikdash, so too maaser sheni cannot be eaten, not even in Yerushalayim, without the Bet HaMikdash up. Kodshe Kadashim, the continuation of the Mishnah, teaches that if someone eats from the Holy of Holy sacrifices outside the temple courtyard, a Kohen who eats outside gets lashes, and also someone who eats Maaser Sheni outside of the walls of Yerushalayim deserves lashes. Tanena Chadazimna, Maaser Sheni Vekdesh Lo Niftu. Hold on, a question about Maaser Sheni in this Mishnah here. We already learned it in the earlier Mishnah back on Daf Yud Gimel, where it says Maaser Sheni that was not redeemed, Hekdesh also that was not redeemed, if one eats it, one gets lashes. So I already know that if you eat Maaser Sheni without being redeemed and improperly, not in Yerushalayim, then one would get lashes. Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina, Sefa b'Maaser Sheni tahor v'gabra tahor, deka achil chutz lachomar resha, b'Maaser Sheni tameh v'gabra tameh, v'ka achil leh b'Yerushalayim. So Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina resolves the, not really contradiction, it's a doubling, and explains that this Mishnah that we're talking about here is talking about Maaser Sheni, that's tahor, and the person who is eating it is tahor, and that's totally permitted if it's in Yerushalayim. But if that person eats it outside the walls of Yerushalayim, they get lashes. But generally, in Yerushalayim, one has to also be tahor. So he's the right guy, tahor and tahor, but the problem is the place. That's this Mishnah. Resha is talking about Maaser Sheni in Yerushalayim. The problem is either that the food is tameh, Maaser Sheni food that's tameh cannot be in, or that the person eating it is tameh. Either way, if one eats it in Yerushalayim, one gets lashes. Ironically, if someone tameh, or if the food is tameh and one eats it outside of Yerushalayim, one does not get lashes. Only lashes if it's in the place where you could have eaten it, were it tahor. And anyway, that's the first Mishnah is referring to that case. Now what's the source that you would get lashes if one eats Maaser Sheni while tameh? Detanya, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Lo bi'alti mimenu betameh, ben shani tameh v'hu tahor, ben shani tahor v'hu tameh, ve'echan muzhar al achila, eni yodeya. So the answer is from a Braita where Rabbi Shimon says, the pasuk regarding bi'ur ma'aser. This means at the end of the 3rd year and 6th year of the Shemitah cycle, one has to make sure that any maaser that he owes, that maybe he's storing up and he just has in the house, he has to go and get rid of it and give it to the proper destination where it's going to go. And he has to say a declaration that I did not get rid of the maaser while tameh. So we learn from here that maaser and tumah don't go together. And this is true whether the person is tameh but the maaser is tahor, or whether the person is tahor and the maaser is tameh. Either way, there's a prohibition. You can't have maaser while tameh. All right, then from here I know it's prohibited, but I need an azhara in order to get lashes. It can't just be stated like it is here. I'm made sure it's not tameh. We need it to be formulated as a lo ta'aseh, do not do this, in order for it to be liable to lashes. And Rabbi Shimon says, where's the azhara regarding eating while tameh, or if it's tameh? I don't know the answer. So we're going to try to help out and find an answer. Tumat haguf beheja ketib, nefesh asher tigat bo, v'tamea ad ha'erev, v'lo yochal min hakodashim v'gomer, ela tumat asmo minayin. If the person eating it is tameh, well, that prohibition is explicit in a pasuk that says a person who touches some tameh item, he will be tameh until nightfall, and then he'll be tahor, and at that time he cannot eat from kodashim. The rabbis learned from here, what type of item is it talking about when it says kodashim? It must be maaser sheni, because since it says ad ha'erev, it sounds like someone who's waiting till the nighttime to be tahor, which means he went to the mikveh beforehand. That's called a tivul yom. A tivul yom is actually permitted to eat maaser sheni, but not terumah or other things. And therefore, this phrase ad ha'erev implies that we're talking about a tivul yom, and therefore the kodashim is maaser sheni. So we learned from here that someone who is tameh before he went to a mikveh may not eat maaser sheni. That's the lo ta'aseh, and that's the derivation of lashes for a tameh person who eats maaser sheni that is tahor. Ela tumat asmo minayin. But how do we know that if the maaser sheni itself is tameh, even if a tahor person eats it, they will also get lashes? Tichtib lo tuchal lechol bisharecha. One pasuk says that you may not eat within your own gates, meaning in your own town, towns, ma'aser, and so on, and all the things that you can't eat in your own town, but you have to eat in Yerushalayim. Ulahalanu omer, bisharecha tochelenu hatameh v'hatahor. And in a different pasuk regarding bechor behema, it says you should eat it in your hometown. We're talking about a bechor behema that has a mum. Since it has a mum, the kohen can just eat it anywhere without bringing a korban. And it says eat it there, tameh and tahor alike. V'tanya deber b'Ishmael. Afilu tameh v'tahor ochlin b'ka'ara achat ve'en chosheshin. When it says tameh and tahor alike, it means that even a tameh person and a tahor person, if they're eating this flesh of a bechor animal out of one dish, they can do that and they don't have to worry about it. Even though the tameh person, when he puts his hand in, he's going to make the meat tameh, and then the tahor person is going to eat it, and then it's tameh. We don't worry about that because even if the flesh of a bechor animal is tameh, it's totally fine. That's a bechor animal that has a mum we're talking about. If it doesn't have a mum, of course, then it has to be tahor and be brought as a korban. And now we use a gezerah shava, this bisharecha and this bisharecha, to learn that these two are connected. And it's specifically regarding bechor that it says, oh, a bechor that got a mum, that you could eat even while it's tameh. That's okay. But the other one, lo tuchal, you cannot eat ma'aser sheni in that way. If it's tameh, then you cannot eat it. And that's how we learn the lo tuchal here is a lo ta'aseh. That's an azhara against eating ma'aser sheni while it's tameh. So now we derived the prohibition in both directions. Now, how do you know that ma'aser sheni that became tameh? What are you going to do with it? You redeem it. Now we know that ma'aser sheni, if you live far away, you can redeem it for money, bring the money. But now we learn that ma'aser sheni that's tameh you can't eat, so you have to redeem it. What's the source that you can redeem ma'aser sheni? Even if you're in Yerushalayim, Damar Rabbi Elazar, Minay Ma'aser Sheni Shenitma Shepodin Oto, Afilu B'Yerushalayim, Tamod Lomar, Ki Lo Tuchal Se'eto Ve'en Se'et Ela Achila, Shenemar, Vaisam Mas'ot Me'et Panav. Rabbi Elazar teaches, how do you know that? Ma'aser Sheni food that became tameh, you're allowed to, and you really must, because what else are you going to do with it? You're allowed to redeem it even in Yerushalayim, because the pasuk says, if you are far away and lo tuchal seto, literally means you're unable to carry it. For Peshat reading is you're far away and you can't carry it to Yerushalayim, then you can redeem it. But the word se'eto is curious. It's not a usual word. And se'at, according to the Rabbi Elazar, means eating. As it says regarding Yosef, when he gave gifts to all the brothers, and calls those gifts of food mas'ot. So, ki lo tuchal se'eto means, in this reading, that you cannot eat it. That means you can't eat it because it's tameh. If you can't eat it because it's tameh, then you must redeem it. So that's how we know that you may redeem it even in Yerushalayim, if it's tameh. Now another related teaching, Rav Aseh says, how do you know that Maaseh Sheni, even if it's tahor, you can redeem it, even if you're just one step out of Yerushalayim? The pasuk says if you're far, which sounds like it has to be very far that you can't carry it. We could measure whatever that distance, that would be too difficult to carry it. But Rav Aseh says no, even one step out of the walls of Yerushalayim, even there you could redeem it. How do you know? Shenemar ki lo tuchal se'eto. You can't carry it. And he says carrying it means even a little bit of carrying it. Well, it would be any carrying. So any carrying of it is sufficient that you can redeem it. Now we ask about this. Hi, mi ba'ile dechadribis Elazar. How can Rav Aseh learn Lo tuchal se'eto means that you can redeem it even one step out of Yerushalayim? We need these same words to learn the lesson of Rabbi Elazar, that when it's tameh, you can redeem it. No, if you just wanted to learn Rabbi Elazar, you could have used a common word that you cannot eat it because it's tameh. Why use an unusual se'eto that also means carrying? So it means to teach us this as well. Hold on, maybe Se'eto is only teaching us what Rav Aseh said regarding carrying, even if it's one step away, and it's not to teach us anything about it being tameh like Rabbi Elazar said. And the answer to that is imken lemakera lo tuchalit telo my Se'eto shemamina tarte. No, if it was only to teach that, then it could have said, do not take it, litol. And then that would have taught Rav Aseh that you cannot take it, you cannot carry it. So why does it use the more unusual word se'etah? Because se'etah has both meanings and is not the usual word for either carrying or eating, and therefore even from one word we can learn two laws. Yatev Rav Chanina v'Rav Hoshaya v'kami ba'ya lehu. Rav Chanina and Rav Hoshaya were sitting and studying, and a question was raised before them. What if someone is at the entrance of Yerushalayim? He's right in the middle of the entrance. The entrance itself has some thickness, there's thick walls. What if he's in the middle of the entrance with Maaser Sheni produce? Can he redeem it even there? We said one step out is fine. One step in, he cannot redeem it. He can't even take it back out. He has to eat it inside. But what if he's in the middle of the entrance? What about that? And the answer is Pishita. Hu bachutz maso bifnim kelatuhu mechisot. Hu bifnim maso bachutz mahu. Well, let's see. What exactly is in and what exactly is out? Right? Because the person also has some width, and what he's carrying, the carry pack has some width. So the answer would be simple if the person is still outside the wall, but the thing that he's carrying, the produce he's carrying, is inside. In that case, once the produce is inside, the fruit's inside, that's it. Then the walls swallow it up, meaning it cannot be redeemed anymore. It has to be eaten inside the walls. That's an easy case. But what if it's the opposite? A person is carrying something behind him on a backpack. So he is already in the walls, but the backpack with the produce is outside. What do? Can he redeem it at that point? Or is that considered inside since I'm inside? Tana lehu hahu sabab deber Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai ki yirchak b'mecha makom mimelu acha. And so there was a certain elder that taught them a baraita from the school of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai that makes a derasha. When can you redeem it? Only if the place is too far. We make a derasha that this mimmecha from you we're reading as mimelu acha, from your fullness, meaning from all of you, including your appurtenances. Therefore, if any part of you or the things that you're carrying is inside the city, that's called you're inside the city. Only if everything, your fullness, everything is outside the city, then you can redeem it. But if either your person or the fruit itself is inside the city, then you cannot redeem it anymore. Last question. Rav Papa naket le bekanya mai teku. Rav Papa asks, what if I'm in the city, but I'm holding the produce on a long stick that's behind me? So it's far away. It's 10 feet away. It's a long stick. So do I call that, because I'm in the city, but it's far outside the city, do I call that, well, I'm in the city and I'm holding it, so that's also in the city? Or since it's so far away on a stick, so it's not in the city? And we leave that question hanging. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.